Hello, everybody. We're going to get started in just a minute. If you're having any difficulties or have questions, please use the chat box and we'll get you some assistance. But we should be starting here in just a minute or two. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Chris Vonamy. I am the Deputy Director for the DuPage County Stormwater Management Department, and we are here today for a water quality outreach webinar that will cover lawn care, leaves, winter tips, and pet waste topics. We're also covering how organizations can use existing outreach materials to create seasonal public information campaigns addressing these issues. This is a free webinar, and one PDH, one professional development hour, will be available. We have several of these workshops and webinars throughout the year. We find that these are workshops are a great way to connect like-minded organizations and individuals who are concerned with protecting our local lakes, rivers, and streams. These workshops are part of our public outreach and education programs and help us meet our requirements outlined in our permit with the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. This webinar is being recorded, so if you know of others who couldn't be with us today, who might benefit from this information, we will provide a link to the recorded presentation at the end of the show here. And again, for those that have registered, we'll send out a certificate for that one PDH as well. Just a couple thank yous before we begin. I'd like to thank Mary Mitros. She is the DuPage County Stormwater Communications Supervisor, and she's the one that's running our show today. I'd also like to thank the Conservation Foundation. They are partners for all of these workshops, specifically Jan Rail. Jan is the DuPage County Program Director for the foundation, and she usually helps us line up all of our speakers. I'd also like to thank our speaker, Jennifer Hammer. She is also with the Conservation Foundation. And once again, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. Just a quick note here. I am very happy that lawn maintenance will be covered in today's webinar, but please remember to use safety precautions while doing that maintenance. I had an unfortunate incident just a couple weeks ago. I accidentally ran over my mother-in-law's foot with the lawnmower. It was very unfortunate, ugly scene, but there was a lesson to be learned from that. My wife and I agreed that we probably should have buried her a little deeper, just a little deeper. Anyway, okay, that's a joke, by the way. Hopefully no one's calling the police. I'm sure that Jennifer will provide better tips and information regarding lawn and leaf maintenance. But before I turn things over to her, I do want to remind everyone that you are muted. So if you do have questions or comments during the presentation, please type those directly into the chat box and we will relay those to Jennifer either during the presentation or at the end of the presentation. We'll see how that goes. And just as a side note also, I think you're in charge of your own video, so whether you want your video on or off, you can be in charge of that. So, all right, that's it. I think we're going to turn things over to Jennifer. Jennifer is a rock star at the Conservation Foundation. She has been a part of the ongoing success of the foundation for over 20 years, with her most recent post as the Director of Watershed Programs. She serves as technical staff for the Lower DuPage River Watershed Coalition and the Lower Des Plaines Watershed Group, and chairs the monitoring committee for the DuPage River Salt Creek Work Group. Because the water is only good as the land that drains to it, Jennifer also works with private and public landowners on ecological management and is the co-architect of the Foundation's Natural Area Assurance Program. Jennifer is an ecologist at heart, usually carrying a pair of binoculars to look at birds, plants, and dragonflies with her husband, Ed. So with that, again, thank you, Jennifer, for being here. And Mary, I think we can turn things over to Jennifer to begin the program.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mary. We're going to just jump right in. So again, this is a partnership program that we have with the DuPage County Stormwater Management, doing a series of these webinars now that have moved to this lunchtime hour. I'm sure many of you know about the different programs that DuPage County Stormwater Management focuses on. They have lots of great information on their website. We'll talk about a few of their other resources as we go on. Just a quick bit of background about the Conservation Foundation. We've been around for nearly 50 years, preserving land and protecting our rivers and streams in northeastern Illinois. We have a number of program areas, the watershed and kind of clean rivers, clean streams programs that we have is really where most of my focus is. Also work a lot on the land preservation side. We have some great staff working on education, more hands-on education outreach with kids at our McDonald farm, with schools. So a whole lot of different programs going on. Generally speaking, we work in northeastern Illinois. Our primary areas of operation are DuPage, Kane, Kendall, and Will counties, although we do a fair amount of work in Cook, DeKalb, LaSalle, and Grundy in kind of very specific ways. And we're headquartered in Naperville at our McDonald farm. And over those 50 years, we've been hard at work at preserving land, which is really how our organization got started. But we've had our hand in over 35,000 acres across our region, working with both public and private landowners. So jumping into our program today, Conservation Foundation has been involved in watershed outreach since the late 1990s. Some of the work that I started on when I came to the foundation was with the work on the east and west branches of DuPage River and our watershed plans, which included a lot of outreach work from right from the beginning. And we've been working with local watershed groups, the ones that Chris had mentioned in the intro, and as well as groups in the Fox River and beyond. So today I want to just kind of share some of the things that we've developed and things that we've learned working with our partners. But generally speaking, looking at kind of developing water quality or watershed outreach programs and kind of the work going into that. So as we've worked on our programs over the years, we've generally kind of gone through, this various steps of, kind of looking into what the water quality issues are, working to identify local concerns, working with partners, be it through watershed groups, directly with municipalities, through community groups, looking at kind of what our goals and objectives are for various projects, trying to keep a focus on a few projects at a time or a few topics at a time versus, we just can't do everything everywhere all the time. So pulling in our reins a bit and focusing on things. That's where we've sort of each season we have a different focus and kind of working on some different topics within that focus. And then, kind of creating and testing and refining our messages as we talk to people, kind of get reactions to people from, the work that we've put out there, looking at all the different various ways that we can get the information out there. And then the last piece has been, I would say, probably one of the most challenging pieces is that evaluation piece, especially as we're working with partners and communities and how they put that information out. So this is definitely an area that we're continuing to figure out how to best do that evaluation component. So there are a lot of sources of information on water quality issues that we have here in DuPage County and elsewhere, but ranging from reports that Illinois EPA puts together, data that local watershed groups gather from our own experiences and talking to people and being out in our rivers and streams. And from your perspective, I mean, the visual inspections that you do, the things that you see, the things that your community maybe asks questions about or complaints about. I mean, all of that kind of goes into, looking at identifying what those issues are that we need to focus on. But then we're also given some direction through the MS4 permit, where they actually list out specific things that you should have some sort of outreach material on. And then, as far as specific water quality topics, that short list there, it's a short list, but it encompasses a whole number of particular stressors, but we can kind of boil things down to kind of 4 major areas of focus. And this comes from that information from the Illinois EPA's 303D list, as well as data collected through the DuPage River Salt Creek work group. So I wanted to go through each of those sort of 4 topic areas and have some discussion about how these things may impact your community, because this is sort of this is what helps as you start to design a program or messages, is to understand how these things impact your community, or different segments of your community. So really, in order to be successful in developing that messaging, we need to understand the problem, how it affects communities and residents, and then what we want them to do. So I tried to put together sort of some examples for each of these topics about how these major stressors may impact your community or residents. So stream habitat loss. I mean, habitat loss in general, is an issue across our environment, but as we look at specifically within those stream corridors, some of that habitat, examples of that habitat loss is bank erosion. And so while that is detrimental for water quality in and of itself, also obviously has impacts with the streamside landowners or infrastructure that may be adjacent to streams. There, just fewer fish and other wildlife as that habitat degrades, which kind of gets to some of our quality of life issues as we really look to improve upon our communities. Possible loss of flood storage. So as streams become deeper and wider because of erosion, they become disconnected from their natural floodplain areas, or as those floodplain areas, not that they're really being developed going forward, but as that development, some of that development that has occurred in the past that has disconnected those floodplains, so losing that flood storage, and then just general degraded water quality. Fecal coliform, this is just one of those things. I mean, it's just gross. So fecal coliform coming mostly from pet waste across, from a stormwater perspective, pet waste, and then to second degree or other wildlife poop out there. But it's gross when you come across it on a sidewalk or on a path. But there are some other real impacts as far as disease and parasites that are passed through that, to whether that's to people or to wildlife. And it really impacts our recreational opportunities, whether it be along waterways, but that material, the poop, it adds nutrients to our waters, which we'll see some of those impacts of nutrients in a minute. But so these are definitely issues that we're concerned about. And the reduced recreational opportunities, and particularly of like those opportunities or recreation where you're coming in contact with water, kayaking, canoeing, walking through the water. I mean, that just increases the potential for disease when our fecal coliform levels are high. Chlorides, this is an area where I spend a whole lot of my time working on issues surrounding chlorides. And there are many ways that chlorides impact our community. So while we need to use salt to keep our roadways safe, That really comes with a cost, and that cost is much bigger than just the cost of, what that bag of salt costs and, how much you pay somebody to put it down. But it impacts aquatic life, and straight up it, can kill critters that live in the river, plants, definitely impacts their reproduction cycles. So just overall harmful to aquatic life, but it also damages infrastructure, anything that has steel in it, our bridge structures and decks, entryways into buildings, things like that are all damaged through the corrosive nature of chlorides, including our vehicles, whether it's our personal vehicles, the various vehicles that municipalities own, whether it's plow trucks or those vacuum trucks, things like that are all impacted by that corrosive nature of chlorides. It kills and damages vegetation along our roadways, and then all the way down to it's harmful to our pets walking along the sidewalk. So there's a whole range of impacts from chlorides. And then excess nutrients. So this is a big topic nationwide of the impacts of too much nutrients. So this is an odd pollutant, if you think about it, because nutrients are a part of our natural cycle in our streams, and it's really we're looking at what the excess amount of nutrients going to the streams and the problems that those excesses are causing. So algae blooms in general, it really decreases, impacts our ability to utilize waterways from a recreational standpoint. But in more and more areas, excess nutrients are contributing to what is referred to as harmful algal blooms. So these are blooms of blue-green algae, algae that actually impacts both human health and wildlife. That can be very serious. I mean, even from being near as well as touching these harmful algae blooms, because that actually gets up into the air. So they're becoming a larger and larger issue in areas that we haven't seen them before. So we do have issues with harmful algal blooms in DuPage County, in particular some of our lakes within some of the forest preserves. So they send notices out when people shouldn't be in contact with those, but this is definitely something that we're seeing more in more places. Again, that reduced recreational opportunity, and then to looking at the impacts and stresses that it causes on our local wildlife, really how it's associated with the amounts of dissolved oxygen in the water, and really creating kind of stressful kind of situations for aquatic life. So all of these things are all associated with some of the stormwater pollution, that we're focused on here in these conversations. But one of the things I always like to remind people of is that connection between kind of our stormwater and wastewater. So we have stormwater permits that have a lot of guidance, but at least at this point don't have specific permit numbers that we need to meet, water quality numbers that we need to meet. And so we have a lot more leeway in how we deal with some of those stormwater regulations. And we're able to use education and outreach to address some of these things. And really getting to the point that it's much cheaper, like with most things, to keep our stormwater clean versus trying to clean it up after pollutants have gotten into the water. And so we can if we can really utilize education and outreach even more than we currently are, I think we can really start achieving more results with this. And when we can keep our stormwater cleaner and have cleaner water getting into our streams, that will result in healthier streams, which helps our wastewater treatment plants because the stringent nature of their regulatory requirements is really based on the quality of our streams. And so when we have more problems in our streams, those wastewater treatment plant permits generally get more stringent, which is really costly. So I think we can definitely do a lot more on the stormwater side to keep our streams clean. And in most cases, that stormwater is managed by a municipality that also runs their own wastewater treatment plant. So, these are two programs that work hand in hand. So as we work through, again, developing our outreach programs, I mean, these are things that we really kind of sit down in our office and both talk through with staff as well as with our program partners, whether that's through, some of the watershed communities that we work directly with, through our watershed groups, or working with the county, or working individually with communities to get some input from them. Definitely something that we're continuing to expand upon, how we get more of that input, but really setting some goals. So, what is it that we want to achieve with the program at hand or the topic at hand? So just some examples of what some of those goals might look like. Who is it that we want to reach? What are the audiences? Because some of these audiences are very particular, especially when we talk about like pet waste. It is really reaching out to those people who have pets, dogs in particular in this case. So it's a little bit narrower audience. And then what exactly do we want them to do? And then how will we know if we're successful? So those are some of the things that we really kind of think through. So here, just kind of read through some of the examples here of whether you're increasing awareness about particular stormwater problems, trying to increase particular behavior, participation in particular behavior. An example of an objective that might be, developing, conducting a couple of rain barrel sales or workshops within a particular time frame, or meeting with stakeholders to really look at how can we deliver messages in a way that's more inclusive and that we're getting to, all the audiences that we're looking for. So some of the strategies that we try to utilize as we're putting these materials together of, trying to keep things simple and straightforward. I think and that's where it really gets to sort of narrowing the particular issue that you're trying to focus on, so that you can keep it a simple message that, we can be very concrete about what we want to achieve with that. Really trying to make it as relatable as possible. How do these things impact you as a resident, as a pet owner, as a business owner, and how can you be a part of the solution? An area that we've really been working on, both within our watershed outreaches, as well as some of the other work that we do through the Conservation Foundation, is really trying to use more pictures and stories to connect with people versus putting up statistics. I think we definitely get a lot more engagement with pictures and stories and humor. Some of the things that we really try not to do as much as possible is judge, doom and gloom. People don't, I think they're bombarded in so many of the negative things out there. We really want people to feel like, yes, although we do have this problem, there are things that you can do to be a part of the solution. And then I think a really important thing is the idea of not overpromising that, this practice is going to be the, end all be all. It's going to solve all our problems. There is nothing out there like that. And I think being honest with people about, the things that we want them to do and how, either how it'll impact the problem or, I think a great example of this is in the early days of encouraging people to use native vegetation and do more native landscaping, is that use native plants, they're no maintenance. Well, that's just simply untrue. It's a different kind of maintenance. You might not need to water them nearly as much, but when we've had like the drought that we had over this past summer, you're probably still going to have to water those plants, or there is still maintenance. There is still weeding, cutting things back. It's not just throw these plants in the ground and walk away. And I think because of that overpromise in the early days of that, it really can hurt that movement in the beginning. So really trying to learn from some of those experiences that we had or that we've seen in other places. Really starting to think about like where you might be able to use different materials really helps before you start to develop them, because looking at correct size or length or the type of format that you need for these different different areas. But I think all communities out there have at least a number of these opportunities that are already existing where they can incorporate more outreach around stormwater issues. You know, whether it's components on your website or if you have a blog or vlog, you know, various types of newsletters, both things that you might mail out to your residents or make available digitally, you know, various aspects of social media. More and more communities are developing videos. I think most communities that I've driven through, you know, have some sort of electronic sign that they use to let residents know about events coming up. You know, those are all opportunities to be able to develop outreach materials for. All those TV screens that communities have put up in their, you know, foyers or even businesses, you know, those are other great places to be able to put messages, knowing where you want to use those. So like designing a graphic for a electronic sign, you know, out on your street corner is really going to be different than, you know, a graphic that you might put on social media. Just looking at the, not only the size, but also the fact that like somebody who's driving past that sign at 30 miles an hour, like you need that message to be short and large, you know, so that people get the message as they're going past versus, you know, having a blog post where people can, you know, spend a little bit more time looking at detail. So those are definitely things to be thinking about, you know, as we put together materials. So we have a lot of existing material. So this is really based off of work that we've been doing with DuPage County over the years, and work in particular that we've been doing with the Lower DuPage River Watershed Coalition and the Lower Des Plaines Watershed Group. We've been hitting, so all of these topics have many different pieces underneath them as far as materials go. And we've been building on them year after year. So these are topics that that really hit on a lot of different things. You know, some of them, a good portion of them are stormwater. You know, there's a connection to stormwater in them, and others are more just general kind of interest that we can tie. You know, as we do this work to help keep our water clean, you know, it benefits these other things, whether it's part of the ecology or recreation or things like that. So, you know, within each of these topic areas, we have a number of different resources. Some of the other resources that are out there, the county has been, you know, really building their efforts through both they have their Facebook page for Love Blue Live Green, as well as a YouTube channel, you know, that they're adding materials to as well. So definitely things to check out. So jumping into our kind of topic areas, I'm going to try to go through all of these in sort of a similar format of kind of what the problem is, what we want people to do. And pet waste in particular was something that Conservation Foundation focused on in 2020 into 2021 with the help of a grant from Illinois American Water. We created a number of outreach materials, needed to do an outreach campaign on pet waste. And this campaign both helps address just general water quality issues around fecal coliform, but particularly within DuPage County, there is a total maximum daily load study for fecal coliform on the east and west branches and Salt Creek. So really communities within these watersheds, you know, there are some real reasons why participating in a pet waste campaign like this would be beneficial. So kind of looking at, you know, what the issues are with dog poop. So it definitely pollutes our local waterways when it's left on the ground. You know, between the bacteria, very large amounts of bacteria and very small amounts of poop that are left there. It's not natural. You know, the food that we feed our pets is, you know, it's manufactured. It breaks down very differently than wild animal scat, and the types of bacteria that are found in dog poop are very, you know, can be very problematic both for people as well as wildlife. And you know, like I said, walking along a trail, poop is really gross, especially when it's stuck to the bottom of your shoe. The thing we want people to do is pick up poop every time, everywhere. That's part of our messaging. And then following through on what, what we want people to do is then to dispose of it in a trash can. A picture I have there might be a little difficult to see as I was trying to minimize pictures so I could send my presentation out. Their poop picked up in plastic bags, but then tossed to the side of a path. So yes, they picked it up, but then it wasn't disposed of properly. So this, it doesn't really fix the problem. And so, in some of these things, we need to be very specific about what we want them to do. So not only pick it up, but then dispose of it properly. And this is a problem that, as I've talked to some of our partners, Forest Preserve District and other places, just the stories and my own personal experience of walking my dog down some of these trails of, poop flung 10 feet off the trail into the woods or sitting on a, tree stump or something. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Pick up the dog poop, throw it in the trash can. So as part of this campaign that we put together, we developed a series of messages. So basically giving communities or partners all the pieces that they needed. So we provided messages and then various graphics that people could use, as well as, or just take the social media post itself and to be able to use these, as they reach out to their publics. As part of the grant, we were able to create a poster that was turned into a sign. And so the aluminum sign with a vinyl coating on it with the graphics. And then we were also able to purchase a number of pet waste dispensers and the bag dispensers and bags. And so we have these actually available for free. We've worked with communities, with park districts, with homeowners associations. So if this is something that you might be interested in, please contact us. Basically, the process is to partner with us. We provide you with the signs and the dispenser. You install them either on an existing signpost or a new signpost. Take some pictures to share with us, as well as share on social media, and then doing a series of social media posts over several weeks, including blogs in a newsletter, or we have articles that you can put in a blog post or a newsletter, and help to coordinate with that sort of outreach program across other organizations so we can have a wider audience. So one of the things we had done a real big push on this last spring. Our plan is to do that again this spring. So as we're trying to get more people involved in this, and then really have a big push probably in May, where all of our partners that we've worked on with this will again kind of provide all those messages and materials and really have a coordinated effort that, every Friday in the month of May, we want people to, post various social media messages to kind of raise awareness about picking up dog poop. So we'll definitely be reaching out to folks on that over the winter as we make new plans, more plans. So the focus on leaves and lawn maintenance. So I've wrapped both of these up into here kind of for the, just looking at the time allotment that I had. These two really go hand in hand here in the fall. So issues that we have with leaves in particular at this time of year is that when it rains, phosphorus leaches out of them and goes right down the storm drain and out to our streams. And so trying to minimize the amount of phosphorus leaching out of those leaves and the impacts from nutrients on our waterways, as well as, the leaves on the street plug up storm drains, so can contribute to localized flooding issues, or as those leaves get into our storm sewer systems, clogging up pipes and making maintenance a little more difficult. So the behavior changes that we have is, what can you do on your own property to use those leaves as a resource? So mulching and composting, but then also, if you need to dispose of your leaves, what do we want you to do with them? So again, we have a number of materials, both from social media and blog posts about using those leaves as a resource on your property, whether it's mulching with your lawnmower, mulching things into then using what you do collect, putting it into flower beds, doing a leaf mold bin. We have instructions on how to do that to then create a valuable composted resource to use next year in your gardens. So really trying to provide guidance on how to use those leaves as a resource, what to do for fall cleanup in your yard. We've done some webinars on that in the past, and we have a blog post kind of summarizing those activities that you can share with residents, and about kind of really leaving some areas maybe not quite so tidied up, leaving stems standing and things like that that are good for our pollinators who maybe have laid eggs or are overwintering in some of that plant material, and the importance of leaving those components in our yards where we can. So we have, like I said, a number of materials focused on what we would like residents to do on their yards, particularly in the fall. And then understanding too that you have people who don't garden, who don't maybe do flower beds, or just have a whole lot of trees, and they need to dispose of those leaves in a different way. And so as we look at leaf collection, we're more or less split across our region of either doing loose leaf pickup at the curb or bagged pickup. And so we've created messaging around both of these collection systems, so that depending on how your community implements their leaf collection system, we have materials. But really getting at, where do we want people to put their leaves? Most communities, they want them behind the curb. There are a few communities out there that do ask people to put it in the streets. That's really a practice that we're working with communities to try and change, to address this issue around phosphorus and clogging up storm drains. And so being able to really showcase what we want people to do. To support that, along with some of the blog posts that we have, newsletter type articles that we have, we've also put together a number of social media posts, things that you can use both from a very timely manner of, hey, it's going to rain, please help us get leaves out of the street, or keep your storm drain clear out in front of your house, to, again, information about what to do with leaves as to use them as a resource, when leaf collection is going to start, getting that messaging out to people that, hey, it's going to be, later this week or tomorrow, or, whatever, we can customize these, but to really have that open line of communication with your residents, so that they know if they rake their leaves, that they're not going to, to the curb, they're not going to be sitting there smothering their grass for, weeks on end, that this is when we're going to be out there with the trucks to pick them up. We've also added some pieces about, what actually happens to the leaves when they're hauled away. Again, just helping to try to close that loop on the information of where they go. And then just some information too, we've created a few posters on, again, just raising awareness of what the issues are around leaves in the street, or leaves in the street, and the problems they cause. And this is one of the first pieces that we've also translated into Spanish. We'd love more input on how communities communicate with their non-English speaking residents, and ways that we can work with you where it makes sense to create more materials that are bilingual. Winter chlorides, this is an area, actually, I believe we're wrapping things up. We have deadlines within our work that we have with DuPage County that keeps us very much on schedule, so that we're getting materials each year, those new materials created in a timely manner to get them out to people as they're planning outreach or planning newsletters. And so actually, I may be showing a few things on here in a few slides that are new, and then will be part of the package that's heading over to Mary Mitros this week, of new materials we have for this winter. So some of the focus around our winter chlorides outreach, particularly geared towards residents or commuters, our problem of it just being over applied. Yes, we need to use chloride to keep our surfaces safe, but we really use way more than is necessary. We've, over the last 30 years, the usage of salt has increased incredibly, and a lot of that is due to sort of these unrealistic and unsustainable expectations of how quickly roads are cleared, or the bare pavement type policies, if somebody goes out and they don't, see a sidewalk or walkway covered in, salt crystals, that, they think somebody hasn't done their job right. And so, really trying to combat some of those the ways that people perceive things. And then just, people not prepared for driving conditions when storms come through, but, the idea of need more time to, taking things slow, using appropriate footwear, being, kind of sensible, using sensible sort of caution and weather conditions. And so really trying to hit on those types of issues. So some of the behavior change that we're really looking at is, when you're out there, when you're clearing your sidewalks or your driveway, to clear that snow first, not to, don't use salt to melt your snow. Use that mechanical means of clearing first, and then use the right amount, which we really kind of try to get at with our materials. Having patience, this is a very complex program to clear snow, and communities have a plan, and they're working hard at doing this, give them time to get their job done. And now, something we've definitely learned there's a lot more flexibility on through COVID is, if you have that option to stay at home and work from home today because there's a storm, or go in a little later so that, the fewer cars on the road just helps get the job done quicker. So again, we have a number of different types of materials ranging from posters and bookmarks and our salt scatter cups and social media pieces. We have a number of blog posts. We have a few new ones that aren't on this list yet. We've got some PSA video with webinars. We put together a training on how to, 10-minute video on how to calibrate a walk behind spreader. So really geared towards park districts or private contractors, making sure that they're using the right amount out there. We've put together a list of FAQs. And I'm realizing as I really tried to minimize the size of my presentation, it kind of made some of this stuff blurry. A lot to read on a screen. Anyway, that really wasn't the point, but just the fact that we have, these things. If you don't have a list of FAQs around snow clearing on your website as a municipality, here's something that you can draw on. We have it both available as a PDF that can be left as a sort of general statement, or as a Word document that then you can customize to the specifics in your community. And all of these things, particularly on the winter side of things, are available through the saltsmart.org website, which is a SaltSmart collaborative program that the Conservation Foundation coordinates around chloride issues for the region. So like I mentioned, some of the new stuff that we have that will be heading Mary's way this week. We have some new posters and outreach that we've been working on. So the poster there on the left is really meant to be hung up in an entryway, whether it's a business or a school, where generally people have, maybe a broom and a bucket of salt out there, but to have some sort of guidance about what should be done to, clear the snow and use salt in a responsible way. And just a little bit of messaging to think about, that the salt cup isn't the first thing that you should be grabbing as you are trying to, keep those walkways clear. And then another big push that we're making, we have many communities in DuPage County that are using anti-icing. So putting on that salt brine down, be it on roadways or sidewalks ahead of a storm. And the use of that is, we're using a whole lot less salt, and we're stopping the bond from forming between snow and ice and our pavements. And that allows us to then scrape snow off much quicker. Or in the case of like light snows, it just melts it right off without having to get out there. So it's a very proactive way to address snow and ice in our region. It is something that we're really, the push has been for communities to get to the point of utilizing anti-icing where does it, when it's appropriate. And we really want to kind of get that message out and help communities get that message out. And so the idea that, not expecting to walk across, that crunchy salt on the sidewalk or on a roadway, to kind of lose the crunch and love the lines. We really want to see those lines out there. We want people to understand what those lines are out there for, and that this is really the best practice that we can be doing to keep people safe. So one of the things we're really going to be working on this winter is kind of pushing and promoting that hashtag of love the lines. So you'll definitely be hearing more about that as we go into the winter and some of the materials that are coming out for this winter. And then the last piece is really, we were trying to have some fun with this. It definitely comes out clear when you download it off the website. But just to have some fun with the idea of how we want people to clear snow from their own properties, and the tools that are available out there, and when to use the basically the right tool for the job, and thinking about the amount of salt that they're using, and hopefully getting that point across, so that also when they go other places that there isn't that expectation of just lots of salt on the sidewalk, that we don't need all that salt. And really, when it's dry out, like after the storm, and there's still a bunch of salt on the sidewalk, that can be swept up and used again. It's really a definite sign that you put too much salt out to begin with. So this could be used as sort of a standalone piece. It could be, I definitely could see it in like a HOA newsletter. And then we're also going to be breaking it up into sort of individual squares and using it like a photo stack on social media. So, these are some of the pieces we've been working on, and we're really very interested to work with communities directly through the county, through our watershed groups, not only to help you utilize the materials, but also to get your input on formats, on messages, ways that we might be able to customize things. Definitely input on accessibility. So, how do you communicate with your non-English speaking, portions of your community, and are there pieces that we can work with you on, whether it's taking some of these pieces and translating them, or utilizing, maybe some of that messaging needs to come a little bit differently based on the community you're trying to reach. So these are all things that we're super interested in working with communities on. They can you can contact either Gian, who's our DuPage County director, or I directly, send stuff through Mary or Chris at the county. They know where to find us. And I think I'll kind of open things up to questions at this time. Chris.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jennifer. Great presentation. We did have some questions kind of rolling through here. Let me see if I can relay some of these to you. The first one is, it's not really a question. It's, whoops, where did that go? I guess it's more of a comment. But according to Doug Talame, one should not mulch leaves because there are valuable insects living in the leaf litter. Mulching kills the insects we need. I don't know. Do you have you want to respond to that at all, or?
Yeah. So, this gets to how you may use your leaves. And so, like, if you have flower beds or areas that you can just rake your leaves to, and allow them to be for the winter. We definitely talk about that in some of our blog posts, and this is some of the discussion we're having, because although it's only fall, we're already starting to think about what our spring and summer topics are for next year, and this, as well as even some things around mowing and protecting our pollinators, is some of the messaging that we're going to be getting into. Depending on how many leaves you have, how many trees you have in your yard, there's going to be different ways that you're going to need to deal with them. And so we're trying to provide options out there for, kind of that range. And so we do talk about how we can manage our landscapes to benefit the insects that are part of our natural community. But we also have people who, like, they're just not going to do those things. And so we have to help along at the different points in the conversation or where people are at. So we try to provide information kind of across that spectrum. And so where we do encourage people to create those spaces within their yard, mulch, whether it's just raking them up and keeping leaves as they are, or if it's mulching them into the grass, because that's the opportunity or that's the option that, that people are kind of willing to do. So we try to provide options kind of across that spectrum.
Okay, great, thanks. Here's another question. Do you conduct surveys or use other methods to determine if people are changing their behaviors based on your educational outreach?
So far, we have not. And this is an area of kind of a lot of discussion, both internally, both to understand how our materials are being used so that we're creating materials that are useful, period. And then with, so this is sort of a split because we create materials for other people to use. Sometimes it's challenging for us to determine, whether that behavior change is happening because we're not the ones actually distributing it. So that's part of what we're planning on for this winter is to actually start sitting down with communities individually, kind of a subset of communities that we work with to understand how they're using our materials. If they're not using our materials, why and what can we be doing to make them more useful to them? But then also working with those communities to help figure out if we can gauge and evaluate behavior change, which is a big topic. And it's actually one of the things that came up in the new draft of the MS4 stormwater permit that is suggesting the communities need to do this type of evaluation, which I think is going to be very challenging. And if, figure out if that does end up sticking in the permit, I think it's something that we're really going to need to think about. And are there some ways to do that evaluation on a broader scale or working together? So definitely an area where I think we're going to need to do some work on.
Okay. Here's one. Do you have any recommendations on how to connect with private property owners, like property managers for commercial areas with large parking lots to encourage them to use less salt?
Yes. Again, like I said, this is an area, salt in particular is an area I have a lot of focus on lately. The Conservation Foundation received a 319 grant to develop an Illinois-based parking lot and sidewalk training and certification program. So to be able to do training and provide a certification for those who attend and participate in the training and testing along with that. It's the first step in being able to either provide a framework for individual communities to develop their own ordinances on the type of training or B&Ps required for private contractors. It also starts to lay the groundwork for some things that from a broader group of folks working on this topic of getting to the point of limited liability legislation. And in order to be able to put that legislation forward, we need to have a certification sort of program in place. So that's part of the building block. Also, through the training program and working with private companies to do the right kind of documentation. I mean, that right there will help them if they have to go to court of having that facility plan and having the documentation in place. So we're working on that, and that should be done by the end of 22. Along with that, in addition to the grant, what the grant is funding, we're also going to be working on marketing materials for basically to help those private contractors be able to explain why they want to do these different practices and to work with their clients on that. So there's a lot of outreach that we're going to be working on to support that, as well as working on some trainings for property managers themselves. And so within that audience, they have their own needs for continuing education credits and that. And so we're looking at developing some trainings that would be geared towards them as to why these types of practices are actually better for keeping their surfaces safe in the properties that they manage. So it's definitely an area that there's going to be a lot of focus on over the next year and a half.
Okay, great. Thank you. A couple more comments here and questions. One person lives in an unincorporated area of Wheaton, so Milton Township Highway Department clears our streets. They apply salt before it snows. We hate it, and what should we do? And then this person also had another comment that's just said, I think that Jennifer just answered my question, not putting down salt, but using anti-icing material.
Yeah, so this is work that DuPage River Salt Work Group has been very active in, particularly within DuPage County of getting agencies trained on these types of practices. We actually just held our 5th workshop on Tuesday. We had virtual workshops this year. 3 of them focused on public roads and 2 of them on parking lots and sidewalks. And actually, I think I believe if my memory serves me right, I think we actually had some people from Milton Township participating in that training. But yeah, I mean, there is definitely, there's different equipment that's needed for anti-icing, but there's also a lot of great information out there and available about, when you putting salt out is ahead of a storm, as dry rock salt is not effective. There's many, definitely other practices that can be utilized instead. And I think the first step is getting folks trained. And we have a lot of great agencies in DuPage County, including the county itself, that use anti-icing. So there's definitely resources available as far as, finding a peer in another agency on how to get started with this.
Great, thank you. One more question regarding some salt. They ask, why does DuPage and I guess other agencies use, why doesn't DuPage or other agencies use sand instead of salt? I use sand on my sidewalks and driveway and it works great every time.
Mm-hmm. So there are places for using an abrasive like sand. The challenge with that, particularly in our suburban areas where we have storm drains, is that sand is on the street and then ends up in our storm drains and can cause a lot of problems within our storm sewer systems. So sand is definitely used in like the forest preserve use sand where they're not, wanting to use salt because of the forest preserves and sensitive areas that they're trying to protect. But for the most part, sand is not used in DuPage County. And it really has to do a lot with our storm sewer system. So using it on your driveway, it's a lot easier for you to go through and sweep that up and maybe use it again, or, it just sort of washes off into the grass along your driveway. But when we use it on our roads, it can cause a lot of problems with our storm sewer systems.
All right, great, thank you. One final question. Do you have suggestions for communicating with your local municipality about these issues? For example, what suggestions do you have to successfully get your city, village, county to include these messages into newsletters and social media, etc.?
I think, one thing, you can direct them either to the county or to the Conservation Foundation for access to the materials. We're, like I said, happy to help people, help communities, help, really any kind of agency who's interested in getting the word out on these things. So we have a lot of resources that are free out there. And then some of the other things, there are communities, pretty much every community in DuPage County, although they do participate in their stormwater permit with the county itself. But they do have requirements to educate their public on these topics, to utilize these materials and get the word out. So, there are things that really hopefully would compel a community to participate in some way. And there's a lot of different ways for that participation to happen, and whether it's on their website or through newsletters or things like that. But there is a lot of free information and materials that are available. And hopefully that right off the bat helps to open up that line of communication, that they're not having to create these things from scratch. We're trying to take as much of the work out of it as possible to provide these materials easily and in formats that can be used in many different ways.
All right, great, thank you. I had just one other quick question, but it was regarding frost heave and the appropriate depth to bury things in the backyard, but I'll email you later. We don't need to have that as part of the recording. Hey, great job, Jennifer. We really appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge and experiences with us. We're kind of up against our time limit here, so we're going to go ahead and close things down here, I guess. I would like to thank all of you again for joining us this afternoon. We hope you have enjoyed and learned a few things from this webinar. Remember, Mary Mitros will email everybody with a link to the presentation, recording of the webinar, and that PDH certificate. We do have future webinars coming up on November 18th and December 9th. I think Mary will include what those topics are in her email when she sends out that link. So that's all we have today. Hope to see you at these future webinars. Thank you very much, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you.